Ever since helicopters were introduced to military service, they have been an indispensable asset to logistics and combat that the world would never quite be the same without. These flying blenders have revolutionized combat logistic with this one simple trick: the ability to fly without motion, or as the normal people call it, hover. Because of this, any country with a competent enough military is able to pick up and put down objects anywhere they want, like some isometric strategy game without the map limits. Supply camps, FOBs, and isolated villages with supplies, medical evacuation, or humanitarian aid, or even use them to LARP as Detroit residents and steal each other's things. If the mood is right, you can even secretly penetrate enemy forces with deep insertion missions, all using nothing but helicopters. But all this being said, just like anything else, these oversized upside-down lawnmowers do have some drawbacks. The two most pressing of these drawbacks are their speed and their range. Helicopters are not particularly fast vehicles for a whole variety of reasons, but mainly due to their usage of rotors instead of a fixed wing to generate lift. This means that reaching their destinations can take time, and time can be an incredibly valuable thing, sometimes even the difference between life or death in a military context. Furthermore, helicopters don't exactly have the best of range. Since this is unfortunately the case, they can often only be used for short hops instead of long-range operation of fixed-wing aircraft. While in-air refueling does exist for helicopters, this implies that you have refueling support in the first place. This means that there needs to be either a fixed-wing aircraft for support or a helicopter already ahead of you, which still, as you could imagine, limits your airborne capabilities. There have been many attempts in the past to combine the utility of these two vehicles, from the V-22 Osprey to tail-sitters and various other contraptions. The idea of the raw functionality of a VTOL and the speed and range of fixed-wing flight has been quite a popular concept over the years. But what were to happen if, instead of trying to turn an airplane into a helicopter, we tried turning a helicopter into an airplane? Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the helicopter that convergently evolved into the UH-90 Ibis from Nuclear option. Hey guys, it's Messier45, and this here is my totally original flyout model that I 100% made myself in this game here, which is 100% flyout. Oh my god, it even has the same camo. Okay, it's not exactly the same helicopter, but based on function, there's only so many differences you can actually make on each helicopter from each other. I'm sorry, Nuclear option devs, I didn't mean to. So I'll wage a guess here that everyone watching this video knows what a helicopter is, as well as what an airplane is. If you somehow don't know what those are, I'd be quite surprised as to how you even found your way to this YouTube channel in the first place. I'd even wager that most of you know what a coaxial rotor helicopter is. However, if you combined all three of these seemingly random attributes, you get something truly unique. And had the Defiant X not existed, it would be something that none of you would have seen before. A coaxial rotor compound heavy lift helicopter. Now, besides being a flying buzzword machine, these helicopters actually have quite a few advantages to offer. And in this video, I plan on explaining at least some of those advantages to you, as well as the potential drawbacks that these helicopters have, all while building my very own, totally original coaxial rotor compound helicopter for my fictional militaristic nation named after my beloved cat, the United Federation of Bow. So if any of those words I happen to string together there sound even vaguely interesting to you, I would like to introduce you to the H-115 Noricker, my compound heavy lift helicopter. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. Now, before we start to build our accidental wish.com UH-90 Ibis, we need to start by looking at real examples of real compound helicopters. What are they? Why do they exist? What functional purpose do they have? Why do so many concepts look absolutely stupid? Out of the entire myriad of failed compound helicopter concepts out there, the two we'll be choosing and the two that inspired the build the most would be the Sikorsky S-72 and the Sikorsky Boeing SB-1 Defiant. The absolute biggest issue with high-speed helicopters, especially compound helicopters, is a little aerodynamic phenomenon known as P-factor. Imagine, if you will, you're on a merry-go-round spinning in a circle, or any centrifuge really, and if you're a man like 93% of my YouTube audience is, go figure, you for some reason decide to urinate off the side of it. Because the merry-go-round is constantly putting your body under an acceleration to remain in a circle, and whatever leaves your body is no longer under influence of that acceleration, it'll simply fly off, and you won't have to worry about getting wet. This is generally true for any angle on the merry-go-round, with no exceptions. Now, if we introduce a very strong wind to the equation, such as a helicopter moving forwards quickly, this begins to change. When your nondescript slightly yellow bodily fluid is advancing with the wind, it gets pulled farther away from you, and when it's retreating into the wind slows down the fluid, maybe even blowing it back on you and getting you wet at certain angles. In essence, that's exactly what's happening on the blades of a helicopter, or even a propeller if there's any incidents other than 0 degrees in reference to the propeller. One side, the advancing side, will always generate more lift than the retreating side since the wind is running over the blade faster. This lift imbalance can be a huge issue at higher speeds, and it makes the lift they generate asymmetric. So how do our peculiar rotor wing devices counter this? Well, first flown in 1976, the Sikorsky S-72 was an experimental helicopter exclusively designed to test rotors at high speeds. This 50-year-old helicopter was at the cutting edge of helicopter development, and interestingly enough was also one of the first helicopters to feature an ejection seat, shooting off the rotors with explosive bolts to give the pilot a safe escape, as well as a fully integrated fly-by-wire system. The S-72 was tested in and could fly in 3 distinct configurations: as a traditional helicopter, as a compound helicopter, and as a fixed-wing aircraft, which just might be the most cursed looking photo ever. And don't worry, I tested my helicopter as a fixed wing too, just to prove that it could and provide you all with this absolutely cursed sight. Anyways, the unique part about the S-72 compared to the other compound helicopter we're looking at is the wings. The S-72 was developed into what is known as the X-Wing program, where the rotor RPM was meant to drop or shut down entirely at higher speeds, instead relying on the wings for flight. And regardless if the rotor shuts down or not, by offloading power from the helicopter blades and instead relying on the wings for high-speed flight, P-factor and otherwise asymmetric lift becomes far less of an issue, instead being easily counterable or entirely non-existent with no blade loading. It was expected to fly at speeds exceeding 300 knots, far faster than any conventional helicopter, but it was only able to conduct flight tests without the rotor, and as we all know, this concept never truly reached any form of operational capacity. However, it did provide a great testbed for future single-rotor compound helicopters yet to come. The SB-1 Defiant, on the other hand, was far closer to an operational helicopter than the testbed S-72, yet still tragically fell a little bit short. The SB-1 Defiant, as opposed to the S-72, was a coaxial rotor helicopter with no wings other than the rotors up top. The SB-1 used data from previous experimental helicopters such as the S-69, which was part of the advancing blade concept. In essence, a traditional helicopter, while still generating lift with the blades, will always have to worry about asymmetric loading. However, if you manage to introduce a second coaxial blade spinning just above it, this issue melts away. One rotor produces asymmetric lift one way, and the other rotor produces asymmetric lift in the opposite direction, entirely cancelling out the dissymmetry of lift at higher speeds. This is, in essence, the same reason why helicopters like the H-47 were faster than other helicopters of the time period. However, there are some issues with a coaxial blade. Since the blade flap from the asymmetric lift is in opposite directions on a coaxial helicopter, you have to worry about the blades colliding with each other. And on top of that, the high speeds can lead to excessive vibrations, which can still be an issue. This is why the SB-1 Defiant concept was known as a rigid blade helicopter, using these coaxial rotors combined with a rigid blade system to prevent rotor collision or excessive vibration, as well as a propeller for forward thrust. The SB-1 was able to demonstrate a top speed exceeding 240 knots, far faster than any helicopter currently in service with the US military. Unfortunately, the SB-1 Defiant did not make it into service. However, its rigid rotor coaxial system is something that we could certainly learn a thing or two from, especially when developing our own helicopter. Alright, history lessons over, so let's think about how our design actually works a little bit. If you watched my tilt rotor video, you might know that from this time period from the late 90s to 2020, it's known that the UFB is fighting insurgents in less developed territory on account of all the slave labor we use for our rubber plantations, backed by rich investors, of course. So for this purpose alone, helicopters are fantastic. Easier to operate out of less developed territories, and with the ability to hover in case we need to, let's say, land at a camp, fire from a mountain ridge, or maybe even kidnap the president or something crazy like that. But don't worry, at the very least the politicians in the UFB don't like kids, so that's a +1 over America. The thing is, we already have an attack helicopter, which as you know is a small slice out of the big old pie of helicopter functionality. This is, of course, the V-92 Encroacher, a tilt rotor with good range, armament capabilities, and speed, especially since we want them to be able to fly back to the UFB on their own to deal with protesters who aren't, actors on government payroll. But that leaves a large amount of military functionality completely unused. So what if we had a helicopter for everything else? This is the true purpose of the H-115 Noricker, a helicopter that can do just about anything, from heavy lift to medevac or even anti-submarine warfare on our Navy variants. For this video we will be developing that Navy variant of the helicopter. Theoretical other variants of the helicopter involve the Army/National Guard variant, an Air Force dedicated airlift variant, as well as the Special Forces variant, the H-115 DIP or Deep Insertion Penetrator. The helicopter combined features from both the SB-1 Defiant and the S-72. The helicopter used a rigid coaxial rotor, as well as a wing with a higher incidence, helping offload some of the blade loading from the rotors at the higher speeds. To propel the helicopter fast, we used these two side-mounted propellers, which you might notice are particularly close to the doors. To prevent service members from being fed into the Service Member Blendetron 9000 here, we added these grates over the duct from the front side. And even if you stuck your fingers in there, you'd need to have fingers long enough to make a prostate examinee shudder to actually hurt yourself, because there's a 7-inch clearance in the ducts to the prop, even at max feather. Also, because of its various functionalities, the helicopter had some rather unique features. Being an equal or slightly larger cab space than the CH-53, this helicopter could carry, depending on fuel load, a payload of about 14 tons. And on top of this, it could carry these payloads at speeds exceeding 200 knots and at ranges exceeding 1,200 kilometers, beating out the CH-53 in all three categories by just a bit, as I'd expect of a more modern and likely more expensive helicopter. A crucial part of the Navy variant, and much of the reason why I decided to build the Navy variant, is the fact that it needs the most utility out of any variant of the helicopter. The Navy variant was responsible for airlift in cooperation with the Marines, anti-submarine and anti-surface warfare, as well as cargo and heavy lift. This means that we needed all sorts of features to make it work. This includes weapons pylons for a whole variety of armaments, a targeting cam in the nose with a laser designator, thermal and visible light camera, forward-facing flare pods, a rappel hook which is swappable with a suspended magnetometer, and a dedicated gunner suite in the cockpit for the co-pilot with their own joystick just for targeting. To make this helicopter actually fly like a real helicopter as well, I needed to do some radical things. From all the missing features in flyout, as well as how painful blending anything that isn't a tube is, it's a miracle I didn't just give up halfway through and try building in Blender instead. But after 3 different Lewis scripts, 4 different PIDs, including one for hover, and a nonsense linear equation just to make the blades not do this, we finally had a functional flying helicopter. So after giving it a nice, fresh, squeaky clean coat of paint, and then smearing it in dirt like a true flyout player, it was finally time to fly out and answer the burning question: what exactly can you do with this helicopter? The H-115 Noricker isn't just a helicopter, but it genuinely might be the most interactive vehicle I've ever built yet. With all sorts of additional Lua features thanks to Ghost Slant mod, as well as a full fidelity interior, this helicopter somehow achieves this all in less parts than most of my other builds, meaning that with the 0mm optimization trick, it genuinely runs better than just about anything I've made. So let's just say that this little propaganda film worked on you and you managed to become an officer then rotor wing pilot in the UFB military. How will you be using my helicopter? As you all may know, there is only one true canon war in world building for my fictional nation. This was the Slandus Islands War, fought around the time of World War II, where both the UFB and my buddy's nation, which, as you know, is full of evil war criminals undeserving of human rights, aka the PRH, fought for control of this desolate rock in the middle of the ocean with just about zero strategic advantage. In the process, we've accidentally made a species of bird known as the Slandus Island puffin go extinct, but that's okay, they kinda deserved it for standing in our way. Anyways, that was in the 30s and 40s. As you probably guessed, this helicopter did not come from that era. So to justify our combat vehicles, the UFB is liberating this tropical territory to the direct south of the nation. Now that's not to say we weren't already there. The UFB has maintained some form of imperialistic control over this section of land since the 1800s and has since done wonderful things with it, such as gently persuading all the locals to work on our expansive rubber and sugarcane plantations with reasonable working benefits such as letting their families live another week. However, our liberty and order in this nation is being stripped away by evil insurgents and terrorists. They keep sending illegitimate messages to the impressionable youth, such as that maybe they'd be better off without the UFB. If we lose this territory, who knows how this could affect our way of life? We might even lose our low-cost DoorDash deliveries. Or think about the economy and shareholders. Oh, also they threaten to conduct terror attacks on our cities and slaughter our civilians in some sort of ancestral debt or something, but I don't think that's nearly as important as the DoorDash or investors, so But obviously this couldn't happen, so in the 2000s we began a small, low-intensity police action, or just forever war, in this territory. Obviously, the dense jungle territories and lack of air superiority from those savage insurgents meant that helicopters are pretty darn effective. The Noricker here will likely be one of the top contenders for this war, providing airlift, cargo transportation, and in some situations direct air support in cooperation with the UFB Royal Marines and Army. As you saw from the montage, the Noricker is more than capable of conducting combat in these regions, and its high top speed of around 220 knots helps it travel further, faster, and more effectively than any other helicopter in the military. Furthermore, its fly-by-wire and heavy airframe means that it can operate in the harshest conditions, perfect for the stormy season in the region that occurs in the winter. All in all, the vehicle is also just really fun to fly, so if you're looking to fly it or take a gander at all the horrific scripts inside the vehicle, you can always join my Discord server. Discord's also under a bit of a controversy right now, I'm aware, and I was considering saving my vehicle somewhere a bit more public, such as, I don't know, GitHub as well. Let me know what you think in the comments below, but otherwise, see you!